On July 24, 1953, Marilyn Monroe, en route to Banff to shoot outdoor scenes for River of No Return, made a train stop in Vancouver, British Columbia. At the station, she ceremonially met Chief Joe Mathias, hereditary leader of the Capilano Band of the Squamish people, who offered her a formal greeting and a traditional gift, marking a rare public contact between Hollywood and that Indigenous community on Canada's Pacific coast. When tracing the history of the Inuit, one notes that life on the ice shaped their dress. Parkas, a key wardrobe item, arose from the need to retain heat while hunting seals or fishing on frozen seas. Made of furs worn first side out or of dried intestines that block the wind, they show the complete use of the harvested animal, a practice that ensured survival and demonstrated respect for the harsh environment. In an early 20th century photograph, a Plains Indigenous man is seen holding a child, possibly his son. The image, made on glass plates common at the time, lets us notice the fur coat, the beaded fringes, and a shell necklace, items worn in both everyday life and community rituals. In oral accounts and travelers' notes from the 18th and 19th centuries, it is recorded that the people today called Cherokee refer to themselves as Aniyunwiya, pronounced Aneyunwiya. In their language, this word affirms the group's identity and is often translated as real people, or in another reading, original people, reminding them who they have been from the beginning. In 1938, at the studio's request, 12 Blackfeet men left Browning, Montana, with some relatives and headed to Hollywood. They traveled in a rail car provided by the Great Northern Railway, a practice common in the company's tourist excursions. After crossing the Rocky Mountains for 3 days, they arrived at 20th Century Fox to act in and advise scenes for a children's western. The film, Susanna of the Mounties, starred Shirley Temple, then the box office champion. The Crow, an indigenous people of the Northern Plains, appear in the records under different names: Apsaluk, Absaroka, or Absaroki, variations that arose when explorers and missionaries tried to write down, as they heard it, how the group refers to itself. The English term Crow did not come from them. It came from their Hidatsa neighbors, who called them the people of the big-beaked bird, an expression that likely refers to a founding clan or to a ritual in which that bird held a central place. On February 17, 1909, Geronimo, the renowned Apache leader who had fought Mexican and American troops for decades, died of pneumonia at age 80. At that time, he was a prisoner of war at the Army garrison in Fort Sill in southwestern Oklahoma Territory, where several Apache groups had been confined since 1894. A cabinet card made then survives. The photo shows Geronimo leaning against a log, perhaps pausing while he watched his surroundings. The scene shows a woman of the Apache people beside a gray wolf. For those who study southwestern cultures, this encounter carries historical weight. The wolf appears in origin myths, healing rituals, and as an example of collective courage. By posing with the animal, the woman reaffirms a symbolic kinship and recalls the practice of observing the wolf to learn about hunting, caring for offspring, and defending the homeland. D'Auteste, active in campaigns against U.S. expansion in the late 19th century, earned respect among the Chiricahua Apache as a fighter and messenger. Chroniclers say that on raids and escapes, she rode for days, handled rifle and bow with precision, and procured game. She ran with scouts and in ambushes went forward into hand-to-hand combat, achieving a level of effectiveness rare among her contemporaries, men or women. In 1898, several Tonkawa leaders traveled with a single Lipan Apache representative, all from what was then Oklahoma Territory, to take part in the Trans-Mississippi International Exposition held in Omaha, Nebraska. The fair, organized by local businessmen and officials, sought to show audiences in the United States and abroad how the region west of the Mississippi River was advancing in public works, expanding trade, and exhibiting a diversity of customs. Herman Asenap, called Greyfoot in his people's language, served for years as chief of his community. Day to day, he coordinated clan meetings, settled internal disputes, and handled relations with white neighbors. He also spoke English well enough to mediate conversations at the Post Oak Mission and with the United States Indian Service, becoming a bridge between cultures. Treat the land well. It was not given to you by your parents. It was lent to you by your children. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. Tilda Crazy Horse. According to Government Photographic Service records, Niak Khanum, known in civil records as Frank James Allen, and his wife Ashka Blue, called in English Lucy Thompson or Mrs. Lucy Allen, posed in 1930 for a portrait taken on the Skokomish Reservation in Mason County, Washington. Members of the Skokomish Nation, they appear in attire worn for ceremonial dances, robes and skirts of mountain goat wool, fiber spun by their own families, a garment valued for its durability and its link to ancestral stories. Harry with Horns, then a Lakota sub-chief, was photographed around 1898 on the Rosebud Reservation, South Dakota. The image captures a period in which the U.S. government tightened control over reservations, imposing new land laws and hunting limits. The turn into the 20th century brought forced boarding schools for indigenous youth and railroad expansion, changes that disrupted the Lakota way of life and that of other native peoples. In many settlements, we called grandmothers and other older women unchi, a term spoken with respect. Oral accounts show that they held a central place in the family. They cooked, cared for the grandchildren, and told stories that preserved the group's memory. They stood firm in times of poor harvest or illness and without fanfare, distributed provisions. They spoke little in meetings, but their words carried weight. In 1904, during the St. Louis World's Fair, created to mark the centennial of the Louisiana Purchase, several Southern Arapaho leaders traveled with their wives to Missouri. In the Indigenous Pavilion, they pitched tipis, demonstrated dances and everyday crafts, and talked with federal agents about the changes reservation life had brought to their people. In this photograph taken by Norman A. Forsyth in the early years of the 20th century, we see a Kootenai family gathered in western Montana. Men, women, and children stand side by side wearing textiles, beads, and furs that the group wore at community gatherings. The black and white image shows how this family preserved daily practices at a time when external pressure on the region's native peoples was increasing. The Umatilla Reservation, created shortly after the 1855 Treaty of Walla Walla, lies near Pendleton, Oregon, and is the homeland of the Confederated Tribes. This union brings together three Sahaptin-speaking peoples, Cayuse, Umatilla, and Walla Walla, who have inhabited the Columbia Plateau long before European arrival. Each people preserves seasonal rituals, festivals, and its clans, but since the late 19th century, they have negotiated jointly with the federal government. A photo taken in 1910 shows a Umatilla girl in everyday dress in front of her family. This photo, made around 1900, depicts a woman of the Oglala Nation, one of the Lakota Sioux groups. The portrait, common in federal agency archives and private collections of the time, lets us observe Oglala life practices at the start of the 20th century. She appears wearing the ceremonial dress that typically marked village gatherings and rituals. In a portrait made in 1912, we see Situuka and Katquachnea, husband and wife of a native nation in the United States. The photographer asked them to stand side by side with a direct gaze, a common studio posture of the era. Their clothing tells stories: robes, bead necklaces, feather ornaments, and designs passed from generation to generation, pieces chosen to show respect for their people in a time of strong external pressure. The Choctaw Nation, a prominent presence in today's U.S. Southeast, first appears in European records in a set of French colonial reports from 1675, produced by travelers in the Mississippi Basin. The Choctaw regard Naniwaya, a large earthen mound in east-central Mississippi, as the place where, according to their oral histories, their people emerged. They therefore treat it as a mother mound and a fundamental reference for collective identity. Quanah Red Feather Blackstone was born on December 13, 1882, in Eufaula, then the Muskogee Nation Territory, now Oklahoma, and died on January 10, 1985. A singer, stage artist, and activist for Indigenous culture. She belonged to the Muskogee Nation. She was one of 10 siblings and the daughter of a Creek father and a mother of Cherokee descent. While still young, she began singing traditional pieces in local schools and churches. Later, she toured the country, promoting her people's music. In the early decades of the 18th century, the Comanches, a prominent branch of the Shoshone people, began the march that led them to leave the Rocky Mountains. With horses obtained through trade with Spaniards, they crossed the wide prairies until they reached the territory that is now Texas. The journey, driven by the search for steady game and trading partners, ended with the group settling on the plains, where they soon controlled trade routes and consolidated a reputation as a dominant force in the region. Born in 1795 and deceased in 1858, Chief Oshkosh became a leading voice among the Menominee. From 1827, when he was chosen by the elders, he led the community until his last days. He negotiated treaties with federal agents, trying to prevent the loss of traditional lands in what is now Wisconsin. In meetings, he set boundaries, demanded fair compensation, and resisted forced removals. Between the late 18th and the 19th centuries, North America underwent changes marked first by British expansion, and later by that of the United States. In a few years, caravans of pioneers, farmers, and hunters crossed the plains, pressuring peoples such as the Iroquois, Cherokee, and Shawnee, who lost lands, hunting routes, and political space under imposed laws, epidemics, and treaties. Quanah Parker, the last chief of the Comanches, led the tribe through the transition to the reservation at the end of the 19th century. The 1891 photo taken by H.P. Robinson became a key source in museums and federal archives. In it, Parker poses in an Anglo coat and hat alongside bead necklaces, showing the coexistence between U.S. norms and Comanche cultural symbols. The Kiowa, a Great Plains people, once occupied western Montana. Between the 17th and 18th centuries, they migrated south, guided by bison herds and riding horses obtained through trade with Spaniards, until they reached the slopes of Colorado's Rocky Mountains. At the start of the 19th century, after forging alliances with neighbors such as the Comanche, they continued and settled permanently on the southern plains.